Thank you guys for joining us today. I want to, at VRM Intel, just really quickly, the reason we put this up is that we've been receiving a lot of your emails asking what other property managers received for booking pays and cancellations related to concerns about the coronavirus. So we decided to reach out to a few of our friends who are on the call right now. But first of all, I just wanted to say that, like you, we all recognize that the subject is about life and health. I'm sorry, we're trying to log in to two different computers and it's not going to work with feedback. But anyway, so I mean, we all know that this situation is more than just about our businesses. That we are seeing deaths as a result from this virus, and we want to be very sensitive to that. I mean, obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with those who have suffered and are suffering as a result of the virus. I mean, while we're all concerned about the state of travel and the impact that this has on our business, I mean, our ultimate concerns are for the safety of our families, our employees, and the guests that are coming to stay with us. So the second thing I wanted to bring up is that I just wanted to read an antitrust statement. We are not able on this statement, Steve or Jason, are even here to discuss pricing, rates, surcharges, discounting, any operational intentions or plans. I mean, so the statement is such discussions among competitors could be viewed as collusive activity and in violation of antitrust laws. With that, I just want to move forward. What I can say is after previewing this data, that there's a lot more space for optimism than I originally thought, and I think you'll see that as well. Most of we looked at key destinations, including Hawaii, California, Colorado, the Gulf Coast, and the Southeast Atlantic, and spring break is holding up really well. Summer is on pace. Part of that, as you'll see, is that the booking activity was really high in January, which is made up for some of the lag of that in the last couple of weeks. So I want to introduce our panel today. We have with us Simon Lehman, who is CEO at AJL Consulting. I don't think he needs an introduction. He was also the CEO and former president of, or some former CEO also of Phocuswright. So he's a true expert in short-term rentals throughout the world, and we brought him on this call to really get his unique perspective as he understands the international markets. We also have Steve Milo, who is the founder and CEO of V-Trips. Steve has over 2,000 rentals across the U.S. from Hawaii to Hilton Head, so he's been able to take a close look at his data and his cancellations in a bunch of different markets, which in both markets that have a lot of international travelers and markets that are more traditional and derived to, such as Gatlinburg and the Gulf Coast. We also have Jason Sprinkle, who is the CEO of president of 360 Blue Vacation Rentals and the CEO of Key Data Dashboard, which provides comparative source data in our industry. And the ultimate thing for me, and obviously I'm pretty proud of this, is the fact that we actually have source data and real-time data in this industry that I think this is a perfect example in my mind about why it's important to contribute your data and be a part of this. In addition to that, we've got Cliff Johnson. Cliff Johnson was the former COO of Vacasa, and he is now the Chief Commercial Officer at Rented.com, among other things. But yeah, Cliff has been providing property management services in this industry for almost a decade now, and now he's moved on, and Rented is providing revenue management services and data for the vacation rental industry. In addition to that, Laird Stager is also a panelist on the call, so he's going to answer a few of our travel insurance questions, and I also want to thank his company, Red Sky, for sponsoring this webinar. I really appreciate that. We have about 500 people on this webinar, so we are not going to be able to take live questions, but in your GoToWebinar pane, there is a panel that you can ask questions, that you can type them in and we'll answer them. Many of you have already emailed me your questions ahead of time, so I do have those. So with that, I'm going to ask the question, the number one question that we're hearing is this panic or is it reality? And I think that question, I want to send it first to Jason, since you're looking at this with both data and with your property management hat on. Is this a media frenzy or is it a real concern?
Yeah, for our space, I think it's a little bit of both. And first of all, thanks for having us here, Amy. I think this is very important for the industry. So excited to be able to get on and talk to everybody and get some feedback. But I mean, it's definitely something that's affecting everybody worldwide. You can't turn on the news without it taking up every component of everything you see. So I certainly don't think it's not real or it's not impacting our space. But at the same time, there's an awful lot of good news in the data. So short answer is I think there's probably more concern than is warranted once you dig into the data, and I still feel very optimistic about what can happen this year as I dig in and share that with some of you. We've still got a lot of spring break already booked, but there's a little bit left to go. We've still got a lot of room before summer to complete our bookings, and pacing shows that we still expect that time to be filled in. But overall, it's clear in the data that there is a drop in bookings, and it is related to coronavirus, and you can see the trends that we'll go through today. So I think it's something that we got to keep a careful eye on and watch, on a daily basis. That's my initial thoughts.
Steve Milo, you're looking at your Hawaii bookings and your South Carolina bookings across the country. Is it real for you? What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, it's definitely been real. We started seeing some of this starting in February, and then it's accelerated over the last 10 days. Jason's right. It is really market by market. And I think we've got to kind of separate out what creates those differences. So first, markets that are drive-in markets are going to be not as affected anywhere near. So drive-in markets, I don't know if they'll be winners, but they're certainly not going to be affected as much. Destinations that require air, Hawaii clearly is one of those. Those are going to be losers. Although airfare rates have been chopped to the bone, people are still reluctant to fly. Urban markets, for sure, which we really are not in, are problematic as well. So, what we're seeing is similar to what Jason, very similar to what Jason is going to share, which is advanced bookings are down, but at least close in are still up, or at least are not down as much as like summer bookings. So we're not seeing the velocity of summer bookings that we normally would see at this period of time. People are reluctant to book further in advance. But fortunately, we're still seeing bookings for March. We're still seeing bookings for April. And even though we are getting requests for cancellations and or moves, we're still filling in dates. So at least the good news is for our resort destinations, it's certainly more positive than the rest of the travel industry that we hear about.
Simon, from your perspective, you're looking at it from not just, you're looking at a lot of the European business as well. You've got a lot of M&A activity in process right now. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you, Amy, also for being part of this. I think it's very important that we're having a conversation around this. The European market is very volatile. It's like walking on eggs right now. And to Steve's point, it really depends on the market. Italy has just simply lost 100% of their bookings going forward, end of April at least. So there's no movement whatsoever. So it's really destination by destination basis where, yesterday I was in Germany speaking at a conference where people are still pretty confident on both immediate bookings as well as forward-looking bookings. A few additional requests and questions, especially on cancellation, which we'll talk about later. But ultimately, it's really market by market. Urban markets, also to Steve Milo's point, is that they're definitely more volatile. But on immediate bookings, in markets like Barcelona or Madrid, we're seeing like 4 or 5% reduction in bookings right now, and that's what our customers are telling us. And ultimately, literally at the moment, we're looking at our news on an hourly basis, and it can have an immediate effect. And we're seeing massive growth in infections right now, and they're being reported in Europe on an hourly basis pretty much. We're seeing an increase in London right now, and which will have a direct impact. So we just need to monitor it. I think the summer, in terms of the US comparison, we see the summer being still pretty solid. So, talking about the M&As that we're dealing with, we're currently working with some urban M&As and some leisure M&As. And actually the urbans are more impacted immediately, whereas the leisure M&As are far less impacted going forward, where they have strong summer month and they see far less cancellations. They might see a drop in traffic, they might see a bit of drop in requests, but ultimately they don't see a huge increase in cancellations. So I think it's in Europe at the moment, it's really the immediate business that is dropping quite drastically, but the forward-looking business is not as affected.
Cliff, and that kind of brings up my thought, urban versus leisure. What are you seeing there as it relates to the concerns about the virus?
Well, the urban market has a more compressed booking window to begin with. So that's something that you're going to see the impact greater in an urban market where, they're not booking that much 30 days in advance anyway. So the more immediate impact hits them right away. So markets like Simon mentioned, Milan, like everything around Milan is basically shut down and ground to a halt. So people are looking for alternative ways to fill those units. And then markets like Seattle has been hit really hard in the US, whereas, we operate quite a bit in Atlanta where we're based, and we haven't seen it really impact the market at all here. So as in everything in the vacation rental industry, it's really market to market. And I think, we really fought against the alternative accommodation moniker for a long time, whereas it might be something we embrace in the short term because people are really looking for alternatives that have less physical density with other humans in the short term. Cruises are getting hit really hard. Flights, to Simon's point, are getting hit really hard. And so, the drive-to markets might actually see an uptick as people still want to travel, especially with the spring break period here and then summer travel coming up. They just might change where they're traveling. So adapting your marketing to fit, what segment are you losing and what segment might you gain in the meantime.
Right. I think what I want to do is I want to go ahead and let Melanie and Jason jump into this data. And let's see what actually is happening right now. And then I want to discuss it, but I also want to talk about cancellation policies, the questions that I have about cancellation policies, housekeeping, some of these marketing things we're talking about, the messaging ideas. And also, if we have time, I'd like to hit some of these macro issues about potentially how this is affecting Airbnb's IPO, Vacasa's potential IPO, things like that. So I'm going to let Jason and Melanie take it over for a few minutes. Is that okay, you guys?
Yeah, that's perfect. Are you able to see my screen, Amy, with the data?
I am, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So a couple of slides here. First, just on the standard type of data regionally. And let me introduce.
Hang on one second. We're going to turn off our webcams to give you a little bit more bandwidth on this.
Okay, I'll do the same. So,
All right.
okay, so first, let me introduce Melanie. She's the data scientist on our team. She's here to make sure when I throw out a bad number or explain something the wrong way, she keeps us all straight because these are her numbers. But I wanted to put some context to it. The first thing I want to show is just, by region, what we're looking at from adjusted paid occupancy and average stay value. And I think, it's good to remember the good news that's happening here to everyone's point. If you look at the way this is laid out, we've got adjusted occupancy, which just as a reminder, the way Key Data treats occupancy versus adjusted occupancy. Adjusted occupancy is just taking out owner holds or owner stays and holds. So this is looking at, what you booked out of what you had available to book. And if you look across it, you see kind of consistently, this is Hawaii, Colorado, Oregon, Gulf Coast, California, and Southeast Atlantic. You see consistently for March, you've got a downturn across all 6 of those regions in the adjusted occupancy. And we're looking at 2019 versus 2020 pacing. And so it's looking at the same day in 2019, what bookings looked like from an occupancy standpoint versus what they look like this March 5th. And so you're a little bit down in Hawaii, 3%, 8% Oregon, a little bit steeper most of all in California, which is probably consistent with what those of you on the phone would expect. But more importantly, perhaps when you look at kind of the April through July timeframe, you've got a solid percentage of up bookings, and that's consistent kind of with the anecdotal evidence that the folks on the panel are talking about seeing in their own markets. A hair down in California for June, 1% down in June for Southeast Atlantic coast, but those are the type of blips that we see, across the market on a daily basis. So my overall read on your adjusted occupancy, as you can see from here, is that we're seeing a little bit of a downturn in March already, but certainly still plenty of room for summer to book. As I alluded to in the beginning, when you look at the percentage of bookings that happen for summer still in an area like, the Alabama, Florida Gulf Coast, we've only booked what we expect to have been about a third of our summer bookings. And so we've still got, as we like to say, 2/3 of the runway left. And so there's plenty of time for us, to figure out this virus and still have that lull between spring break and summer and fill that summer. And the numbers are still up for summer, so no real impact there. And then average stay values, you see a little bit of fluctuation, but no real significant patterns there. They're jumping out that are other than what we would see on an ordinary basis in a normal year without coronavirus. If we pulled it up, you see some markets that are down and some markets that are up. You've got a little bit lower average stay value in Colorado, but again, nothing that looks to us from the data side to be out of the ordinary. So it is very regional dependent. I think you'll see that throughout the data, but that's the overall look like for occupancy and stay value. Perhaps more relevant are a couple of these other screens. And really when we look at the impact of coronavirus or any snow event or hurricane or whatever the case may be, two ways we can see it in the data. First, one is cancellations that are occurring, and second is an impact to the number of bookings that are occurring. So this is a chart that shows Europe on the top and North America on the bottom, and it's the booking activity for each year over year. And just to clarify exactly what the blue line means in this case, we'll start with Europe up top. We've accounted for the change in the number of properties between the 2 years. So it's a percentage, in other words, of how many bookings you have relative to the number of properties that are in the market. And so, for example, if our Europe database had more properties in the database for 2020 than 2019, that would already be accounted for in the data. So this is a true difference in the amount of bookings that are happening for the same volume of properties.
Hey, Jason, I wanted to pause on that for a second because I think that's an important thing. So what you're saying here is, if I'm not mistaken, is if I added 20 units last year, that's not what's included here.
That's right. So easy way to think of it is if we had 10 bookings out of our 100 units last year, and this year we had 12 bookings out of 120 units, then that would show on this chart as equivalent. It would show it as no
Right.
the same percentage of change. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what you see here, if you look, left to right, January 2nd through March 5th, you can see pretty flat, a little bit up for for January. A few spikes in there, but we were up through January, and then you've got January 24th where we had the first confirmed case in Europe, and you start to see a slide down, and then by February 7th, it looks like in Europe you really started to see a pretty precipitous drop. And the orange bars on the right are the number of incidents of confirmed cases of coronavirus, and so you can see the spike there in Europe, as Simon was alluding to, really taking over, and a quicker and a more precipitous drop in Europe than what we've seen in the US, consistent with the number of cases. And then if you drop down to North America, we were pretty even, a little bit up through January and really into the middle of February. And then you can see as the coronavirus has started to hit the US and as they started to dominate the news there in the second and third week of February, you really saw a drop. But interesting, you didn't see the kind of drop you saw in Europe, but we're catching up quickly. We've only got, it looks like there from Melanie, 191 cases, and that's changing by the minute, I'm sure. But we've already caught up with a 50% drop in bookings as of last week. I think the caveat that everybody on the phone would share and feel is, as we've always warned, when you're looking at any kind of data, it's highly dependent per market, and even within markets, it's highly dependent from a vacation rental side. We certainly got clients that are seeing an uptick, particularly in drive-in markets. When we look at markets like Walton County, where I am, compared to Bay County, Walton County is faring much better, even though we're right next door to each other. As a drive-in market, we aren't seeing as significant a drop as this in bookings. In fact, we're getting calls with some people saying that their plans were otherwise impacted and they want to know what we've got available. For those of you who are having a hard time seeing this data or want to link to it, we do have all these charts on our website as of this morning, and we'll continue to update that. This is the Europe and North American data. I'll show you California in a second, but we'll be, just as soon as Melanie can get an hour's of sleep, we'll be putting more and more regional and state data up there for you to kind of follow along with as well. This next chart is looking at the difference to what Steve and Cliff alluded to, the difference in bookings that are expected to arrive within the next 30 days in orange, bookings that are expected to arrive in the next 60 days in blue, and overall bookings. And this is the same thing year over year. This is our global data set. And if you look there, you can kind of follow along. First case in the US, you see the overall line drop below. But you know, worth noting that you're seeing bookings that are due to arrive within 30 days, as you would expect, pretty significantly impacted, more so than the 60-day, and then more so than the overall. So pretty big drop there. You're down to, you know, you're down to 25%, 27% for 30-day bookings, 24% for bookings within 60 days, and then 23% overall as of the last blip there on the screen. And then a final look at kind of the macro level of data. So this is looking at the top and the changes in the number of reservations. So this is just the delta over time, and you can see it. It's a little visually easier to see. We were up a little bit there, as you can tell, going into January, and then almost neutral going through the week of January 21st. And then a drop that has kind of gained momentum as the confirmed cases of coronavirus have spread. So, you know, as the case count goes up on the bottom, the delta in the percentage of bookings made goes down. So just another way to visualize that same data set. And then direct your attention to the middle of the screen there. This is number of cancellations, and really the first time we're showing the cancellation data here. You're not really seeing a significant change there, and that's reflective of our overall data. You know, we expect that as we get the virus hitting, you know, areas like Seattle a little bit harder, that we'll start to see cancellations go up at some point. Obviously hope for the best and plan for the worst. But overall, we're not seeing any blips in cancellations. So again, I'm sure a number of you on the phone are seeing some cancellations, and others of you are seeing upticks. But overall, the data for the US is not showing that we've got any significant changes in the number of cancellations coming in yet. It's just the opposite. It's pretty flat, and it's down from last year, but definitely a drop in bookings. And then lastly, yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. As far as that cancellation data, that is essentially the number of cancellations as of March 5th today versus for 2020, as opposed to where we were last year, like all of last year. Is that correct?
Yeah, Melanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's cancellations for 2020 versus cancellations the way they ended up in 2019.
Yeah, so these are cancellations by day, so we're able to look at how many cancellations were made on the same day last year is what we're looking at.
I say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So last but not least, just a sense of what we'll be posting on the web here over the next couple of hours, and certainly the next few days, is a start to break this down at a regional level, but we wanted to give you a sense of the first one we've got. And so this is just looking at California, a 5-month pacing for booking activity. If you look at the top two, we've got percentage of nights canceled. Really nothing dramatic there, right? No change other than what we would see, you know, a little bit down in March and April, and just flat for May, June, and July. So consistent with the rest of the country, still not seeing a dramatic increase in number of cancellations, even in California where it's hit the most. And then if you look at adjusted paid occupancy, in the middle, really the same read here, right? We're up a little bit in March and up a little bit, or down a hair, excuse me, in April. But otherwise, overall, just really, really flat for adjusted paid occupancy. And if you go back to that first chart I showed you, you know, still looking at a good summer as of yet. But the real data gets told down in the bookings per day that we saw on the other charts in California. If anything here, you know, reflects the identical trend that we saw before. I expect that its drop is a little bit earlier and a little bit deeper than what a lot of states will show. And that's probably no surprise to you that are watching the news, but you can still see a pattern with the 30-day bookings being impacted slightly more than the 60-day bookings, and those being impacted slightly more than the overall bookings. But, a consistent slide down to the right, approaching well north of 20% at this point. And we'll put these on, like I said, we'll put these on the website. We're trying to do what we can just in putting links and tips that affect us all. A lot of you are reaching out and sending us information, so we're just kind of keep it live and keep it posted, but definitely understand the role of trying to keep everybody updated with a lot of this regional data that, we're very fortunate because of this, essential co-op to be able to share back, and we know it impacts everybody. So if you're not seeing something that you need to see, please feel free to reach out to us, but keep an eye on it, and we'll have additional markets and additional states put up there hourly.
Simon, as you look at this data from your perspective, what are your initial thoughts?
Great question, Amy. I was just thinking about that. And I mean, this would not represent the situation in Europe in any shape or form. It's just,
Right.
as I said earlier, our situation in Europe is literally changing by the hour. So obviously, Jason's numbers have shown clearly that obviously we have a lot more cases, and it's growing exponentially, and it's changing once again by the hour. So we don't even have the opportunity to look at data. We'll literally look at the news and see what is happening in the market, where are new cases, and how does that affect the industry. So we can't be as predictive. It's just all reactive right now. I think ultimately it will be a very strong message for domestic travel as well. And there's obviously positive news too. So while things like this happen, where we have very little control over, panic is being made, it's hyped by media and everything else, people are, uncertain what's going on. I think we as vacation rental industry could not be in a better space to really beat the drum, to give alternatives to cruise ships and hotels and airplanes and everything else. And European market is predominantly drive-in markets, and it's a huge opportunity for us to, and we've been crisis resistant in the past as well, to say, there's an alternative in terms of accommodation, and we have the product that people are looking for, while you can travel to buy your own car and everything else. So I think, besides making panic and trying to read the crystal ball, I think we have lots of opportunities to spread positive news about the market. But yes, for us, it's very hard to predict. Our numbers are not as predictive as the one that Jason has shown. We are working with a lot of different property managers in different markets. Certain markets have lost 100% of bookings immediately, and others are still tracking quite well. But as I said, this can change overnight, where more cases are being reported. And one thing we need to realize that the spread happened in China, or the virus came from China. So that means that we have not yet reached our peak. So we need to be ready for infections to continuously increase quite rapidly, very fast, but then it will drop off again. And now is the time to really stay positive in a sense, and provide a product that is alternative to many other ways of making vacations. So yes, we can't be as predictive as Jason's data is in Europe, I think, but we need to monitor it very closely and be reactive about it.
I really want to address this cancellation issue, because right now there's perception and there's reality. And if the guests are, I think we've definitely seen a slowdown in booking activity. We have guests calling about, or have reported guests calling about cancellations. I have one example that's actually a good one to use. Laird, are you on the call?
I am, Amy.
Tell me about travel insurance. I can't imagine what your phone is doing right now.
We've had a real spike in call volume beginning last Friday. Started about 2 weeks ago, just with our vacation rental companies in Hawaii who had dependency on the Asian markets. But travel insurance calls to date have really been hypotheticals. A lot of fear, a lot of panic, a lot of concern, a lot of hesitancy to travel. We only have a couple of claims from guests who have the coronavirus and some who are been quarantined, but very, very few, mostly hypotheticals, and just don't want to travel and want to know what travel insurance will do for them if they choose not to go on their trip.
I think I lost you.
I'm here.
Okay. So the question, one of the questions that was written in was, we have a client, I guess, who's nervous to travel. Her trip is in a week. She called last weekend and requested a refund or to have her money moved next year because she was anxious. We told her that as there were no travel bans, we were not offering any refunds and that we would reevaluate if things changed. She emailed us yesterday to say she thinks she was exposed, but if we don't refund her money or transfer to the next year, that her family will take the vacation and come on the trip anyway. To travel, this client would get on a plane with her family from New York City and fly to Utah. How should we handle? Any advice?
From a travel insurance perspective, we're unable to address fear, concern, hesitancy to travel. If a guest is sick, we're defining coronavirus as a sickness. If a guest is sick and has a physician's statement with the diagnosis and a restriction for travel, we're able to reimburse them. They must see a physician, there must be a diagnosis, and there must be a restriction for travel. And if a guest is on their trip and becomes sick and experiences coronavirus symptoms, visits a physician, receives a diagnosis and instruction to return home, we can pay their medical expenses and we can reimburse them for the nights that they lose the use of their accommodation. And then if a guest or a traveling companion or a family member is subject to a documented quarantine, as different from the self-quarantines that you might be reading about, a documented quarantine, we can reimburse them. But the majority of our calls are all a hesitancy and an unwillingness to travel, and we're unable to assist with a reimbursement unless a documentable event occurs.
Cliff, I wanted to hit you on this. You and Steve too, we've had some discussions about cancellation policies. Is this a time to address the cancellation policy? Cliff, let me start with you because I know you got some strong feelings on this.
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I would say in general, I think the industry should be moving toward a more flexible cancellation policy. I think it's rewarded the managers that have done that. I mean, you get moved up in search ranks. You don't end up in these situations where you have no matter what, this is a perfect example. This guest is not going to be happy if you force them to keep this reservation. You might win in the sense that you can keep the money because they can't get it back, but it's not going to be a win from a guest experience standpoint in any circumstance. And I mean, I think it's an opportunity to talk to homeowners about having a more flexible cancellation policy so you don't end up in these situations with guests that are unhappy. Now, I will say that just like the impact of the virus itself, cancellation policy and what is the right cancellation policy is going to vary quite a bit from property to property. You know, if this Utah house is a 6,000 square foot mansion in Park City compared to a 1-bedroom ski condo, it's a very different story in terms of your likelihood of being able to book that last minute. And so I think a lot of the same considerations that you would have before go into the cancellation policy, but I think there's an additional factor that we saw from Jason's slides, which is the cancellation rate is actually not increasing, but the booking rate is. So you can address that by having a more flexible cancellation policy with people that might not know what the situation is going to be in 2 months. So they might be trying to plan their vacation for the summer and willing to book now, but not willing to book now if you have a really strict cancellation policy. And in my case, I would rather get that reservation secured at, I wouldn't drop my rates for the summer, but I would, look at least securing as many reservations as I can. I know Steve feels differently, so I'll let him go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a property manager, so I've got owners who are going to fire me if I'm reckless with my cancellation policies, and we're not going to make a knee-jerk reaction. From our standpoint, we have what I think is a very fair and flexible policy where if a guest contacts us and indicates concerns with their stay, that we will move them to a future date. And I think we talked a little bit about what the airlines are doing. The airlines are not refunding. The airlines are allowing free change. So you can change for free. There's not a change penalty. And they're allowing people to change for future dates without a change fee. We're doing the same thing. So I think there's a major difference. And, I don't want to get on a soapbox and, start to debate cancellation policies. I would just say you might shoot yourself in the foot if you make a knee-jerk reaction to change your cancellation policies.
Yeah, just a heads up too, be aware if you haven't reviewed them of the Airbnb and VRBO policies. For those of you obviously who have bookings on those sites, I won't try to speak to what their policies are. We've got a link to them on our website, but they've got, Airbnb in particular has got an extenuating circumstances policy that they posted. Both of the pages or both of the OTAs have pages specifically that speak to their policies and how they're going to handle it and how they're going to handle it uniquely at a regional level, Airbnb in particular. So I think, regardless of what your policy is, don't forget that it might be impacted at the higher level before it gets to you if the OTA is giving the money back for the particular
So I know it
circumstance.
sounds like a dumb question, but if you're listing on the channel, does their cancellation policy override yours?
Yeah, generally with Airbnb and Booking in particular. So I'd actually be curious to get Simon's thoughts on this from a Europe perspective, because they're far more dependent on Booking.com, which has a higher cancellation rate in general. So I think this is very regional. Like in the US, we have a lot of markets that have very strict cancellation policies and historically have for a long time. That's not the case in a lot of urban markets or international markets. So I think it's going to vary quite a bit. And while I'm not currently primarily a property manager, I still have properties that I manage that are my own, and in Africa as well, which is pretty much all fly to markets. And, it is something that I look at, like there isn't a one size fits all model for cancellation policy. But if you find that you're constantly getting into fights with guests, that's probably not a good situation all around.
Yeah, let me take a shot at the OTA policies, Amy, because, I've talked about this and, one of the things, there's a difference between Booking.com and Airbnb, and Booking.com allows you to let the guest sign your contract and would support you if you got them to sign your contract, which provides your cancellation and refund policies. Airbnb, has their own policies and they supersede your contract, and you are likely to get into a debate with Airbnb even if you got the guest to sign your contract. So philosophically, one company is more supplier friendly. Airbnb is certainly more guest friendly.
Simon, what are you thinking about looking at Booking.com, to refer to Cliff's question, from your perspective?
No, I mean, again, I'm repeating myself, but it's a moving target, right? And we have seen, so the first big event that was canceled in Europe was the mobile in Barcelona, which was massive. It's the second largest mobile conference in the world after Vegas. And tech conference, and that was the first one to be canceled, and then everything rippled from there, where ITB was cancelled and everything else as well. So massive events have been cancelled. And what we're seeing on the PM side, I mean, they moved up their cancellation policies because they had a lot of corporate bookings, and they just simply took the money. So on the PM side, you know, they're sort of envisaging that and just say, you know, this is the way it is, and if it's been cancelled, especially on the urban side, then they've sort of, even the PMs have shifted their cancellation policies up quite dramatically, besides what the OTAs are doing as well. But now, obviously now OTAs are trying to soften that and support the industry as a whole. But again, we don't know if what's happening today is going to be the same tomorrow or the day after, because they have obviously more visibility, they have more data, they can see what's happening in terms of search, in terms of booking and requests and everything else. So it's very hard to say, you know, is the situation of Booking.com going to stay the way they handle it today, and what is going to happen tomorrow? So I think it's very hard to give a prediction. It's something that is moving. And now I think in terms of cancellation policies, I would actually say that the property managers in Europe have to take more of that in their own hands as well, and see how they handle that, what is best to protect their business. Because, you know, certain property managers have lost 100% revenue for the next 2 months. They need to restructure their business entirely and think about what's going on. So I think we are in a more volatile situation than how it's handled in the US right now.
Yeah, one thing that you brought up that I think is really interesting is about that these OTAs have demand data. They know how many inquiries are coming in, and they can see so much of that. And I know IC&D and Blue Tent and Q4 and some of these others are on the call right now. IMEG, Realtek. I think that you guys being able to put some information on demand data as you see it throughout through all of your clients to your clients would be really helpful. Laird, there is another question that just came in. It said, how about cancel for any reason policies? Are travelers still able to book those?
Yes, that's a good question. We've seen just in the last 3 or 4 days a huge increase in vacation rental company operators inquiring about that product, inquiring about how it works, and wanting to add it to their offering. Cancel for any reason allows a guest who has purchased the policy within 21 days of their date of deposit to cancel their vacation plans for any reason and receive some products. Ours provide 75% reimbursement, others provide 65%. It's a higher premium, but it certainly works in this type of event. Had they purchased it within 21 days of their date of deposit, they could cancel for any reason and receive the majority of their investment back.
That's really helpful, actually. Thank you for that.
The CFAR policy that people are calling us for are those who have experienced a decrease in their bookings just in the last week, or an increase in their cancellations in the last 2 days. People just calling up to cancel and abandoning their money in total. They want to continue to try to support reservation activity and add this product offering to tell the guests that should they have any concern, they can cancel for any reason and be reimbursed.
Jason, as a property manager, if I call into 360 Blue and I say, I have a reservation for spring break and I'm scared to fly, we want to cancel this because we just don't want to take our family on vacation right now. What is 360 Blue going to say to me?
I mean, the current policy is more in vein with what Steve mentioned, which is, no immediate change to our existing policy. We consider it kind of fair and just and are trying to watch it daily. I think Andrew and Cliff put out a quote last week that said everybody has a plan until you get hit in the face. And I was a vacation rental manager on the coast when the oil spill hit. And so, I know that things change over time, but right now our policy is the same as it's been, which is, we don't offer cancellation once you've booked and paid in full within a 60-day window. And so if you called to cancel for summer, we would give you a full refund. If you called to cancel for spring break right now, we would direct you to your travel insurance policies. And if you're sick or if your family's member is sick, as I understand, Larry, those policies will cover you as they have with any illness. If you're just nervous or afraid, just like in a hurricane situation where you're anxious about a storm that may be there, our policy is not to refund, as is the travel agency policies. But again,
Yeah. It brings up a really larger question about travel insurance. Cliff, I hate to bring you back to your Vacasa days, but you guys didn't offer travel insurance, did you?
We offered trip protection, a very interesting distinction. But yeah, I think there's a lot of, and actually the policy we had there, I don't know currently what it is, but was that if people purchase that, they could cancel for any reason. So we kept it really clean. But yeah, in general, I think that's where you get into a really sticky spot where you have, insurance companies have all these exclusions. And if somebody has purchased insurance and then there's something new that was unanticipated, like, a virus and an epidemic or something, and it's not covered by that, I mean, you might be legally in the right and be able to prevent them from getting that back, but are you prepared to deal with that from a customer standpoint, I think is the other question.
Yeah, I think looking back, right, I think that it's a difference in being a pure hospitality company and also being an asset manager for homeowners in terms of where you have to mitigate risk. The travel insurance, from our perspective, allows you to mitigate many risks that come in. And I think that's kind of an interesting way to look, like dynamic right now. Are our property managers becoming more hospitality providers or more asset managers? And to your point, if you were looking to be more like a hotel, then those 48-hour cancellation windows would be what you would do. But if you're looking to manage the asset, you would look for ways to avoid risk.
Yeah, I would just say that you can do both. I mean, everybody knows one of the things we did at Vacasa was offer guarantees. What that gave us was the ability to get more control from the owner. So if the owner knew that they were still going to get a minimum amount of money, regardless of what policies we had, we were able to implement the policies that we felt were more guest friendly and more conducive to running a more efficient business.
I mean, Steve, do you think cancellation policies are part of your responsibility to the homeowner?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I get where there's this idealistic notion that, we should take a look at our cancellation policies, but the realistic aspect is all of us are in markets where, there's a scarcity of owners and particularly better homes and properties. And we have to be responsible, you called it asset management, to the actual owner, and so cancellation policies are there to protect the owners who have committed to an exclusive contract with us. So I think there's a lot of ways to work with customers who have concerns, and you have Laird on here, and we're a Red Sky customer, and we offer every single customer the opportunity to buy travel insurance. Every single customer gets that opportunity. And we actually pay our agents a bonus for getting the customer to take the travel insurance. And the other thing is we have an extremely liberal policy, partly because of the hurricanes and natural disasters we've had, of allowing customers to move as long as they move into the future within the same property. So, we're trying to be responsible, and at the same time, I don't want to open up a door that's going to potentially cause owners to fire us because we're irresponsible at managing their asset.
Another alternative could also, you see a lot where people will offer a more flexible cancellation policy for a fee. So that's something that we see more and more now, which is
like
kind of a
flight, like an airline.
Exactly.
I'm going to switch gears for a second from the cancellations over to housekeeping. So we want to make sure we cover this. I have a question. Do we need to emphasize with the housekeepers the need to use bleach cleaners for surfaces that are normally touched by guests, door handles, faucets, etc.? Windex is not enough. What kind of policies are you changing in the housekeeping department? Jason, do you want to start with this?
Yeah, happy to. For us, I think it's a good reminder of what we should be doing on a daily basis. Like a lot of these things, kind of like the wash your hands message. You should be washing your hands well before the coronavirus. Unfortunately, not enough people are doing it. But for us, I mean, I think clear communication to our housekeepers and our employees and independent contractors on what the expectations are, as you should already have in place, is critical so that there's no confusion. What changes is probably even more of an expectation from the guests, and necessarily so that you have a clean linen program or something to that effect. You don't have comforters that are impacted that are on your beds. I think that's still, at least in our view, somewhat of an antiquated approach. Most of the people in the Panhandle that I know, and most of the people around the country, have adopted kind of a clean linen policy to where everything on the bed is washed, and I think that provides comfort and reassurance to the guests. So if you don't have that policy in place, I think it's a good time to talk about it. And then, for us, it was a good time for us to go over to the housekeeping department and look at the chemicals we have. We posted on our website this morning a link to the American Chemistry Guidelines that the CDC is directing everybody to for cleaning in commercial settings, particularly hotels and airlines. And that's a list of specific chemicals and cleaning by brand name that you can find on your shelf. And so I would go check the things that your cleaners are using, and I would find out if they're on the list. And if they're not, I would defer to the CDC to make sure that your cleaners are using stuff that's on that list, which is probably a good practice anyway. And then last but not least, use the dishwasher, get disinfectant on the high touch areas. Don't be using reusable sponges and soaps. I mean, I'm not in the cleaning business, but I'm in the, protect the company kind of business like most of the people on the phone. And so I defer to the CDC, and I think our jobs is probably most importantly, just make sure that your ideas and what's happening in the field are consistent. And that's just good old fashioned management of your cleaners.
Steve, have you changed any of your standard operating procedures in your housekeeping department?
Well, I mean, one of the things we've done is we've made capital investments in laundry facilities, which have a much higher ability for heat. One of the things, bloodborne pathogens, other things that transfer with laundry, one of the things that kills them is heat. And, there's still companies that are they really don't even pay attention to the back end and the importance of having standardized processes for stain removal, and getting the laundry to a certain temperature. So about 80% of our properties now have laundry facilities, and it's a selling point, and I think it's a legitimate concern for people as to the hygienic component of cleaning.
Yeah, I think one of the things, for instance, bringing up your laundry in the temperature, for instance, there are a lot of things we don't know yet, but you have in your laundry facility, you have standards on like temperature that linens are laundered in, where there are still people doing laundry in the units, and, in our industry between stays. I'm going to give this to Simon. Simon, do you think, you've talked a lot about standards and cleaning standards. Do you think there's a way to take some of this, to take this situation and maybe use it as an opportunity to improve our, standards for cleaning?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is a massive opportunity, especially for, companies like Properly or Breezeway, who are now introducing, these type of standards and making sure that they're being met accordingly. But I think, this is something we can really rave about in our industry, and making sure that customers understand that an industry is taking care of these measures and they're being implemented accordingly across the processes of cleaning and execution. Yes, we are far away from standards, and as we all know, we don't want to be standardized, but in terms of cleanliness and now obviously from an additional standpoint, having things really clean in terms of what type of materials we use to clean and what is being used, and giving the people the comfort. I mean, hotels have done that in the past, especially in bathrooms where labels have been put, where proper amenities have been cleaned accordingly with the right material, and this is stuff we can do the same, because as I said before, we are an amazing alternative in the travel industry, and we need to meet the standards and give the people and the consumer the confidence that we're not just brushing over to the point that Jason has mentioned, but we're actually doing a great job. And I think this is an additional opportunity for us to make our customer comfortable and say, we have our units under control and we're doing the right things to make sure that that they're being cleaned accordingly and to the right standards, for sure.
I want to, and I know that we had, we have a stop at, I'm not even sure what time it is actually, at 1 Central Time, 2 Eastern. But if you guys can hang out, I have a few more macro questions as well. One of the things that I had an email in about this that said, I have 3 rentals here in Normandy, France. Inquiries have gone off the cliff. More information about the USA has stopped, UK because of Brexit. We are resigned to having a very quiet season, which won't be so bad. It may even persuade me to do that thing we've been avoiding, except that it's time to call it a day after running our business for 20 years. It's been wrecked by banks with low interest rates and Airbnb anyway. Simon, looking at M&A activity and people looking to maybe throw in the towel, what are you seeing right now in terms of how this is affecting people's decision to buy and sell?
Well, our call is going to end in a minute, and then that's a very, it's a long question to answer, but regardless,
well,
there's still a lot of M&A.
I'll stay on for you.
Yeah. There's still a lot of M&A activity going out there, and I think, we first of all, number one, let's not panic. Number two, travel has always bounced back, and this is not the first time we're suffering some massive incidents. We had SARS, we had volcanoes, we had several different challenges to deal with in the travel industry, and travel has always bounced back, and travel has bounced back very fast. So I think I would urge everyone not to make very fast decisions, because after food and the basic requirements of a human being, travel is still very high up on the list, and therefore we need to celebrate that and be strong about it. So travel will bounce back. As fast as it will decrease, it will bounce back. So in terms of how does that translate to M&A, we need to be realistic. Of course, there's a lot of buyers out there who are now looking for cheap deals, because people want to get out of their businesses, because they see the volatility. And I've put a post out there saying that the world number one's word for 2020 is going to be the word volatility, because this coronavirus has shown us on a global basis how volatile we are and how dependent we are on certain things, and volatility is something we need to deal with, and our kids need to deal with going forward. So we're being vulnerable. So vulnerability is absolutely something we need to deal with. And when it comes to M&A, it's the same. When do you buy and sell your shares? And the same goes to companies. When do you buy and sell your company? And what can you expect? And in a crisis like this, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's now cheap to buy, because ultimately there's some very solid businesses out there which are now being affected by a certain volatility, as pointed out. But this does not mean that it's putting pressure on the valuation. When we talk about larger topics like Airbnb and what does that mean for their IPO, is that going to be delayed, which is presumed? Yes, of course. I mean, these type of companies are far more on the radar, but when you look at the local markets, Spain or any other domestic markets where companies are for sale, there are still buyers out there, who have raised capital, who have had a good financial situation, this doesn't mean that the M&A business is going to immediately drop and the valuations are going to drop. But we've had some obviously incidences like Hostmaker and others which are affecting the markets on the urban side. But ultimately, I still believe it's a good space. Other property managers want to grow. They had good years. Let's face it, in 2019, a lot of PMs had amazing years, so they made a lot of money. So it's even the smaller companies who are also ready to buy others and want to grow. So it's not just the large ones who have raised capital or have gone to market that want to buy property management companies. It's also the small ones who had incredible years and others who want to step away from the business and do something different. So I don't think this will put a huge damper on the M&A industry as a whole.
I do want to, I'm reading through questions here too, and that's really helpful. I appreciate that. For people who are looking to wonder about where their data is, where, if we can include their markets, first of all, please contribute your data to comparative data sources like QData. I think that's really important. If they don't have it, we can't show it. And the other piece of that is that if you have the dashboard, you don't have to wait for a webinar to see what's going on. You can log into your webinar and see that. Laird, I have two questions for you that keep coming up. One is it, if an area, a state declares a state of emergency, does that have any bearing on travel insurance?
It does, and our position is that we must receive the content or the information in the declaration of the state of emergency. I believe it was Monday that the governor of Florida declared a health state of emergency. That declaration was intended to allow Florida to access federal funds, and it did not include any travel restrictions, any travel bans, and no language that prevented travel. So we have paid claims that were dependent upon a state of emergency that had very specific travel restrictions, but there's no generalization concerning state of emergencies. We must see the declaration.
The other question I have here for you is CFAR insurance. Is that available outside of the United States?
It depends upon the underwriter and their rules and regulations, but ours is.
Got it. One more question. Steve, I want to ask you about the IPO activity that we're looking at for Airbnb and Vacasa. Where do you think that stands in 2020?
Well, I mean, they're two different companies. I mean, Airbnb makes money, but there's a lot of uncertainty with the coronavirus and in frankly the financial market. So I would suspect that IPO is going to be postponed till 2021. Vacasa is a company that does not make money, just like other companies in the space, Sonder, Stay Alfred, all these urban plays. They are not making money. And I think anybody that goes back and looks at what happened in 1999 and 2000, those companies, once the IPO window closed, and it is closed because of WeWorks, Oyo, et cetera, those companies stopped getting funding. So you're not going to see an IPO for Vacasa. It's not going to happen. What you're going to see is them try to cut their way to profit, or they're going to be sold lock, stock, and barrel to a company that's profitable, or a PE firm that can take them over and make them profitable. But I mean, the gold rush is over, the boom is over. These unprofitable urban players are not going to continue to get funding. And I think all of us on this call can feel a lot better if you run your business and you run it in a profitable way. That these companies that did not run in a responsible way, the day of reckoning is here.
One question I have, going back to the housekeeping thing, is about going to 100% virtual remote check-ins. I know the industry has talked about that a lot, but the question is anyone going to 100% virtual remote check-ins and to prevent in-office check-ins in an effort to attempt to eliminate outside contact from travelers? Jason, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, my thoughts are we're already there. We've been there for the last 10 years. It seems like the better way to do business for us, but I know that it's unique in every market. I talk to a lot of property managers who really see the value of having somebody walk in their office. And I think depending upon where you're located, sometimes that's viewed as a convenience and a way to build a relationship. In our particular market, our people drive in, on Saturday, and they get here at the end of the day, and they don't want to come see us. They want to, they want to go to their units. And so, I think it's a great question, but I do think it's very dependent on the markets. And just real quick on the data, I know there was a couple of questions in there about the fly-in versus drive-in markets, and then we showed some people really what are new KPIs today on the phone when we're looking at that booking per property. We're going to add that stuff to our dashboard here in the next couple of days, so everybody has access to that new KPI and can see their data in that same format. But then more importantly, the stuff like the fly-in versus drive-in and some of these questions that we're all collectively asking ourselves, we'll get that data up there real quick so everybody can see it at the same time.
I will say that since, we had about 150 people that wanted to be on this webinar that were not able to, we will do something in a follow-up form next week. We'll also be reaching out to people about housekeeping to try to put some follow-up information on that. And we were not able to address marketing, but Jason, while I've got you, are you making any changes in your marketing programs? Are you looking at things differently?
Well, fortunately, I'm not in charge of that for 360. I'll defer to them, but the conversations that I've heard internally and with some of our partners out there, and some of the stuff that even you were suggesting, Amy, it's just about it being a great time to reiterate the uniqueness and the value of what we deliver as an industry. To Cliff's point, different than a hotel where you're all jammed in the same spot. Being able to get away and spend time with your family when it matters. Our marketing department's feedback was we don't want to do anything that sounds reactive and like we're addressing it straight on and scaring anybody. What we want to do is we want to remind people that we've got something very unique and that it's a good time to reflect on spending time in the family. So somebody mentioned like a picture of families playing Scrabble in a house without a whole lot more, I think is a real good message. And a lot of our properties are separate and apart, and they're where people go to get away, and they're where people go to spend the best times of their lives with their families. And, we're one of the only industries that offers that. And I think there is a safety and security that comes with that in a time of a crisis. And so I think that dovetails into the marketing in a good way. And, of course, we're a data-driven marketing group. So I say look at your data, but think about your messaging for sure. I think it's a good time. I think companies capitalize on crises all the time. It's a good time to talk to your owners better than your competitors. It's a good time to talk to your employees better than your competitors. And it's certainly a good time to reevaluate your messaging so you can get in front of it.
One thing, when I was doing research on that, why the industry is like the Wild West, I found out in the first vacations, they were actually in the Adirondack Mountains. And the reason, Simon, that we call it vacation instead of holiday like you do is because our first vacations here were about vacating the city. And I think some people, including somebody that instead of taking a holiday in the US, our vacations are about vacating our current situation. And there may be some opportunity for those of you with heavy urban centers as your top feeder markets to push the idea of actually these are homes. These are standalone homes, and to get away from some things, there's some opportunity there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I only want to pick up what Jason said. I could not agree with him more than what he said. And the same applies to the European market as well. So we want to vacate where we are and go away. And I think, there is no other touristic vertical or travel vertical that has a better value proposition to be away from home at home than the vacation rental industry. So I think we need to be smart in terms of communication. To Jason's point, we need to celebrate the fact that we can provide you a place in peace, but not being on a cruise ship, on a hotel or an airplane, where you can enjoy your vacation with your family and everybody else, but still be away in the nature or everywhere else. And there's plenty of products, and we just need to be really smart in how we bring that to our customers. But I think it's a massive opportunity. And as I said earlier, I think our industry is actually more crisis resistant than many other travel verticals, and we need to be strong about that and stand together and bring the message out there.
I don't think I can end that on a better way. Again, we will follow this up. There will be, we are recording this. We'll be releasing that as soon as we get the video back. Cliff, Simon, Steve, Jason, Laird, Melanie, I really appreciate you guys doing this. I know it was last minute. We put all this together in less than 48 hours, and I'm so grateful to you for dropping everything to bring this information to the industry. I know everyone else appreciates it as well. We have some articles with this data on the website. Jason, where can they find your information?
Yeah, just Key Data Dashboard. We got a new button that jumps out at you when you go on the site, keydatadashboard.com, and it says our data on the virus impacts, and everything's right there in one location.
All right, you guys, if there's nothing else, then we will close this out. And again, thank you for participating, and send over any questions you have and we'll send them out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.